The people, places, and things that we honor are always intentional. Communities make choices about whose names we recognize and whose narratives we celebrate. So our lived environments, marked by names, monuments, and memorials, they're not natural, but rather quite deliberate. Consider the Southern myth of the lost cause as a tragic yet pervasive example. In the years following the Union's defeat of secessionists, Southern leaders knew that they lost the war, but they sought to win the narrative. Those who led and supported an insurrection to defend slavery, men like Washington Manly Wingate, were celebrated as virtuous heroes. The lost cause narrative transformed Confederates into defenders of noble ideals with euphemisms such as states' rights and freedom, while obscuring Confederate defense of human bondage. Such intentional acts of memorialization served another purpose as well. It fostered the conditions to undercut any aspirations of a multiracial democracy in the region, and to establish and enforce Jim Crow and unleash a reign of terror over anyone who does not fit a particular conception of white Anglo-Saxon Protestantism. There's a reason that with each critical moment of the perceived multiracial and multi-ethnic progress in America, the symbol of the Confederacy is never far behind. Well, today we confess that campus leaders of Wake Forest contributed to such terrible myth-making that led to these tragic realities. This is why the work of the Slavery, Race, and Memory Project has proven so transformative for our campus. The project forced us to be honest about the many ways Wake Forest was complicit in and benefited from this nation's serpentine system of chattel slavery. Their findings exposed how campus leaders reframed that logic of race-based slavery into the practice of race-based exclusion for an entire century, and along with the President's Commission on Race, Equity, and Community. Today's current faculty and administrators have challenged narrow narratives of nostalgia that have erased the humanity, pain, and suffering of those whom this campus enslaved, exploited, and for too long ignored. By renaming Wingate Hall May 7th, 1860 Hall, we are solemnly celebrating the humanity of those who endured among the most heinous acts of an otherwise despicable institution, being sold at auction. By reframing Wake Chapel with a permanent monument, we will forever narrate that tragic day and recognize the names of all whose lives were stolen and humanity denied. And while Wake Chapel will continue to honor Samuel and Sally Wade as this institution's principal founders, the building will also pay tribute to Dicey and Helen, the mother and daughter that the Waits purchased in 1839, along with the names of dozens of others who served this institution against their will. Thus, the narrative of our lived environment will force us to reflect on pro humanitate from the best and worst dimensions of our history. But to be sure, we realize that some question these efforts. Some claim that we're judging our predecessors according to contemporary moral standards. Not so. At the time of Wake Forest's founding, slavery was among the most debated issues of the age. It led to discord within Samuel and Sally Waite's own family. Churches were torn asunder by debates over slavery. The nation's two largest denominations, Methodist and Baptist, both split in 1845. And by the time that Washington Manly Wingate became president in 1854, much of the nation had turned an eye of judgment against the slaveholding South. Thus, all historical evidence counters any conception of anti-slavery as merely a contemporary time-defined stance. But the tragic truth is this: During the Civil War, an estimated 750,000 Americans died over an idea and an institution that Washington Manley Wingate staked his ministerial and professional career, a moral, philosophical, and theological defense of slavery. And we also know that there are those who suggest that the removal of any person's name from a place of honor is tantamount to expulsion or erasure. Well, the guiding principles of the Advisory Committee on Naming are clear. They distinguish between honoring and remembering. And whenever the community agrees that honoring a figure from the past is inconsistent with our institutional values, we must remember that person, lest we make the same mistakes of the past, lest we forget that we too are capable of greatness and evil, acts of extraordinary honor and terrible shame. So by renaming Wingate Hall May 7th, 1860 Hall, and reframing Waite Chapel with a memorial to narrate this painful history, we do just that. We make the choice to allow a more expansive conception of pro humanitate to narrate our campus. We acknowledge the complexity of our past and a commitment to a more just, inclusive, life-affirming, and thus humane future. And most importantly, we instantiate the wisdom of Maya Angelou in our lived environment. History, in her words, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived. But if faced with courage, it need not be lived again.